Welcome to the Lair. Today we are talking about solo role-playing games. So first, what are they and why do you play them? So as far as the what goes, solo RPGs are games that you can play on your own without a gaming group. And there's kind of a couple different approaches to this, and we'll delve into this a little bit more. But you've got your zine-based game, these two, which self-contained, small print. These came out during Zine Quest. So lightweight, play on your own. Then you've got dedicated full solo RPGs. Captain's Log is the solo version of Star Trek Adventures. And what did you just hold up, Chris?
I just held up a game called Journey by Luke Miller, which is designed to be you going through waypoints on a journey and what you find there and all of that, which is a fairly common mechanic. But I'll get into what I use this for later. But again, yeah, it is intentionally a solo RPG, not adapted from another system.
And then we've got adapting a traditional RPG. So you've got a standalone RPG like Dungeons and Dragons, Shadowed Ark, or whatever, that is adapted for use with solo. So this is let's see, single player mode. I keep wanting to call it Ready Player One, but that's obviously a very different thing. Single player mode for Cyberpunk Red. This is dedicated rules and oracles and what have you for running Cyberpunk Red. I also have Forbidden Lands, although this is the Book of Beasts. It has a section in here for adapting Forbidden Lands to solo RPGs. And then there's journaling games, which you added to the list.
Right. Journaling games are, by and large, a huge part of this market. 1,000-Year-Old Vampire is the first one that I'm aware of, in which it is intended to be you writing a journal of yourself as a 1,000-year-old vampire. And there are
That's awesome.
And there are some really neat mechanics in there. And you use dice and you use playing cards and that sort of thing. You know, part of the game is actually discarding memories and figuring out which memories to keep, which ones to get rid of. There's also Secrets of the Emerald Isle. And the one that I just mentioned, Journey, is primarily, it doesn't have to be a journaling game, but it lends itself to journaling. You know, a lot of these are like this, Be Like a Crow. They're sort of like journaling games. The thing that to me makes them journaling games is that they are basically writing prompts on steroids.
Right.
You know, it is a system designed to get you writing. There are a lot of journaling, like we're going to barely touch on this segment of gaming because there are so many. If you go up to itch.io and search for solo RPGs, you will find a multitude of variety of versions of these to get into. But the journaling games are specifically to get you writing in a journal your experience of this game. Sometimes it's called emergent storytelling.
So yeah, I have some of those too, and we'll get into those a little bit. Like the Thru-Hiker and Hope Is Not a Plan, they're both like journaling style games, but in much smaller condensed format. So the mechanics wise, like how do you actually do this? We won't go into super detail, but it's similar to a regular RPG, but you've got, usually there's some sort of mechanic that's generating the randomized results, because otherwise you're just writing short stories or novels. Or the idea in playing a solo RPG is there is some that you are giving over to the gods of chance, and that can take a couple different formats. So like dice is a common one, just like a traditional RPG, which often use oracles in combination. So oracles are like lookup tables that you can roll on it, and then it inspires you to like either giving you an idea for what to do next, telling you what to do next. I think generally speaking, it's better if you don't rely on the engine to try and tell you what to do next. It's better as a prompt. I think I already mentioned playing cards. Different kinds of cards. I've seen ones for whatchamacallit, tarot cards, right? So that doesn't necessarily have to be your standard 52 pickups style cards. And then block towers. So Jenga, right? So you pull out a block, and then there's a tension that goes with that as you're pulling out blocks. So it becomes a sort of push your luck thing where it prompts you to pull a block. If nothing happens, the tower stands, then you go down one path. And if the tower collapses, then you've obviously gone down a different path. So big question that I get, and I've heard people ask is, but why? I think a lot of times people kind of assume, and maybe it's just me projecting, but you know, I think there is kind of this assumption when I've seen it just in online forums and stuff. It's just people who play solo because they can't find a group, and I think that certainly happens. But I don't think that's the only reason why people are doing this, and I think there's a lot of other reasons why you could. For me, it was because I was in pandemic lockdown, so I started picking up some of these. It was the synergy of Zine Quest that particular year and just being in the pandemic lockdown essentially for like 2 years or whatever, right? Even once we started going back out into the world, my regular gaming group wasn't meeting regularly. So being able to have a diversion from the pandemic and everything that was happening then was my big motivation. But I think some others are, you just need to take a break from your group. Love you guys, but you drive me crazy. What are some for you?
Engaging with something creatively to fill my time. My kids are grown, and sometimes I don't know what to do with myself if I don't have a chore lined up. And but I have chores lined up and I want to do something else. But it's kind of I really love when we talk about emergent storytelling, and I've talked about this before on the show. I really enjoy discovery, whether it's going out into the world and finding new places, like physically, visiting cities, traveling, or in a computer game, the open world thing, discovering things. I really enjoy that. And solo RPGs give me a way to do that because it's GM-less. I'm able to sit down and say, well, I have my character do X. What happens? And then to have the oracles kind of lay out, well, it's not exact, but this thing happens and this thing happens and this thing happens. But what comes of it? And it becomes the discovery pulls me forward with it. It feels less like, oh, I got to sit down and write a story. It feels less like work and more like I'm being shown something. So really, it's an alternative to, honestly, getting lost on the internet, running down rabbit holes at YouTube and Wikipedia and all of that. Finding what I consider a better way to fill my time is to make up little stories like we used to when we were kids, with our little action figures that definitely weren't dolls. And
Definitely not.
Definitely not dolls. I have also used them to learn systems. I think Ironsworn is probably the most prominent one of these because Ironsworn, we've talked about it before. It's a group role-playing game. I mean, it's based on Powered by the Apocalypse. It's heavily customized. But you can play it in one of 3 modes, and I have played it in each of those modes, and each is a different experience, which is neat.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think primarily it's the trying to get into my own head to pull some things out when I don't feel particularly creative and I don't feel particularly engaged with things.
Yeah, I think all those reasons. Plus, I think playing games that your regular group doesn't want to play. Right, so maybe you're diehard D&D guys or you're diehard sci-fi guys and they can't stop playing Traveler. And you want to go off and play a fantasy RPG, or you want to go off and do that, horror subgenre or something that your regular group just isn't into, which is completely fine. It gives you an outlet for being able to do that game without having to actually drag the rest of your players along with you.
Well, I want to mention also, there are other variants of this that we'll talk about a little bit later, but there are solo modes for board games. Dark Tower has one, Arkham Horror has one, there are many others that have them. And, if you can't get a group together to play, that's not a bad way to spend an afternoon.
Right.
And then there's also RPG books from, we had these back when we were kids, the Joe Deaver books and all of that. But Oliver Holm has put out a series of 3 right now called Legendary Kingdoms. I backed them on the Kickstarter, and they are a lot of fun. And yes, you're playing you're not making up your own character so much as you're using the stock characters that they have. But it's well worth the time to sit down and choose your own adventure, dice roll, that kind of thing. It's an RPG because it still all takes place in your head, but it's a little bit thrown together. It's kind of that bridge between a printed thing and then a game like Citizen Sleeper on your computer. That's the same idea where you do a thing, you roll some dice, a thing happens, it explains it to you, and you keep moving. So this whole realm, I think as adults, we have a really hard time doing things by ourselves.
Yes, it's okay, folks. You can.
Well, and not throwing them out to the internet to either be a side hustle or B, content.
Right.
And the idea of building something for yourself, your own inner world, I think is very powerful.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about some challenges and successes later on, but I think being comfortable, being alone in your own head is a thing that the modern world struggles with, perhaps more so than really we did in the olden days. Because we have so many distractions. So moving on to the actual games, I played a few. And so the first one, I think the very first one I actually did, I had backed it for Zine Quest Kickstarter, is Hope Is Not a Plan. Very slim journaling style game powered by Wretched and Alone. It uses dice, it uses a block tower, or it uses cards. But the idea behind Hope Is Not a Plan, and I have to say, when you're playing these games, there can be a little bit of be thinking about where you're going to be going and make sure that you're in the right headspace to do it. Hope Is Not a Plan is a solo journaling game in which you document your attempts to deliver a very complicated engineering project on time and under budget. You hope for success, but you will most likely fail, damage your reputation, and lose your job. So it goes. I do project management as part of my regular job, and I was doing a lot more of it at this time when I played this game. And if you're not in the right headspace, do not play this game, because it can be sort of darkly comedic, right? And it does. Most paths lead to collapse and destruction of your project. But it was fun to play, but you kind of was walking that line when I was playing it, like, this is maybe hitting a little bit too close to home. So make sure you're in the right headspace before you go into these. And then a friend of ours, Daniel Perez, did Thru-Hiker a number of years ago as a Kickstarter. It's currently being published by Light Press, but it's a journaling game of long distance hiking. So we've talked about it on the show previously. I do a lot of backpacking. I think I actually played this before I went to Philmont for the first time. And the idea is that you are through hiking on the Appalachian Trail. So through hiking means that you go from the start of the Appalachian Trail in Georgia all the way to its end up in Maine. And through hiking is a very unique experience, often solo. Occasionally there's groups of communities that come together of through hikers that meet up and then continue on, exchange stories, you get a trail name. And so this uses cards and different stacks of cards to represent different kinds of resources. And you pull from that to, one, help you inspire what happens on that particular day, and then two, where your resources are currently at. And again, this kind of leads to dark places, because, if you're suddenly running out of water and food on the trail, right, you can get very miserable when you are cold and wet while backpacking. I can tell you this because I've done it. So again, you kind of have to be in a good headspace to do it. But it was a fun little game. I definitely recommend it. And another one that was cool, which it kind of straddles this line between maybe board game versus RPG. You are playing a character. It's called Basilisk, which is it's descended from Morkborg. Predecessor to Morkborg was a game called Dark Fort. And it was basically just a one-cheater, and you go and explore a dungeon. And so Basilisk kind of built on that framework where you have a character, you roll up 5 characters, you send them into a dungeon trying to find artifacts. And most of them will die horrible because it's Morkborg. And that's what you do in Morkborg. And the last one I have, which I want to play, which I haven't done yet, and then you have a bunch, is Clever Girl. So welcome to Dino Land, a dinosaur theme park ravaged by escaped predators. It's totally not that other franchise. You don't know what caused the incident that set the dinosaurs free, but it was catastrophic. A pack of highly intelligent, oddly fixated raptors are hunting the surviving human in the park. Will the predators claim one final victim, or the cunning humans survive long enough to be rescued? This is a Dice Tower game. I think it uses the Wretched Alone rule set. But the cool thing about this is, although it's called Clever Girl, you can choose to be either the human or the raptors.
I love that. That's cool. I think the one that fits into this category for me is Void 1680 AM. And this is a game of building music playlists.
That's awesome.
It uses cards to help determine some things, but basically you play a radio DJ on a night shift, and you put together some songs, and then you get callers, and the callers are determined randomly. And to play the game completely, they actually do recommend that you record yourself, that you put this together as an audio experience. And I have not tried that yet, but I've played around with it, and I'm really enjoying the idea of it. But the building a music playlist I thought was a really neat concept. So I'm looking forward to digging into that one a little bit more. I've played more things kind of in the full-on solo RPG realm, which is, maybe a little thicker, with more rules, that kind of thing. A little bit more than a zine, but not overly complicated. It just explains more. Be Like a Crow is a good one. Be like a crow, you are a crow. However, you can be a gothic crow. You could be a cyber crow. You can be a crow living in the world of Bloom County. You can be a crow that, there are many different modes to this game. There's a Cthulhu mode for this game. There's, and because of course there is. But, it is a journaling game of where you fly, what you find. Again, discovery is a big part of this. 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, I mentioned earlier. This one is really neat because of the mechanic around memories and the things you remember and the things that you don't, and how that drives you forward, that sort of thing. It can be surprisingly emotional. It's really got, the way that I play it, because of when I grew up, it always takes on kind of an Anne Rice feel for me.
Of course.
But again, I think depending on what you've read, that will definitely affect Journey, I just mentioned what Journey is, and what I'm using Journey for is I have a D&D world that we created using, my party and I created using Ex Novo, the indie game, which is basically a world-building game. You create a setting, you create a thing together, which has been neat. But I need to expand that now because the players are getting to the level where they're going to start exploring other places. And I want it to be a revelation to them. I don't want them to know it already. Because they come from the start in a small town and get out into the world and you discover things. So I'm using Journey to create the paths and what they find along the way to the next city up the river, or that kind of thing, to work as kind of a prompt engine, so that I don't just wind up regurgitating old modules that I've read, intentionally or intentionally. One of the big thrusts of this D&D world is that it is not like your standard D&D world. In this D&D world is things like kobolds are intelligent creatures with their own societies, and that kind of, so there's a lot that happens that needs to be different because I'm so tired of the Forgotten Realms. So so Journey kind of helps me with that. But we talked a little bit. Loner is actually a toolkit for role playing. They have a number of settings for Loner, but Loner is the system that you use. You can get it on Amazon. I've played a little bit with it. It uses a series of not only dice rolls and cards, but tags and oracles to help you create this story experience. This is the one where they talk a lot about emergent storytelling. So it's less about creating a journal and more about creating a story, and then what you choose to do with it is up to you. I want to mention Mythic. Mythic is a toolkit for taking a regular game and turning it into a solo game. Right. I believe I got it through Drive-Thru-RPG, but I also remember Mephidius was selling it for a little while.
I think so.
As a PDF. That is well worth your time because it brings up a number. If you decide to get into this a little bit more, it brings up different ways to play and different things to do that you might not come across because this is a different mindset.
Yes.
And then again, I mentioned game books, Legendary Kingdoms, Lone Wolf, those kind of things, which is a different experience because you're being told the story. It's more choose your own adventure than like, looking at an oracle and having to make it up yourself.
Yeah.
But still a good time. Still fun to play on a Sunday afternoon when you've got nothing else to do and it's raining, and, that kind of thing.
Yeah, still getting to that. And I realized I'll edit this out. I hit the mic with my book as I pulled it over. Kind of segueing into adaptations of regular games with traditional games with solo modes, because this has become a very popular niche. We got Star Trek Adventures Captain's Log. So this adapts the 2D20 game system from Modiphius for solo play, specifically for Star Trek. And I picked this up at Gen Con in 2023, but I don't think I actually ended up playing it until 2025. The cool thing about it is Star Trek falls into that thing of things I'd like to play, but my group just hasn't gotten around to it. It's one of those, yeah, we're interested, but we really like playing D&D, and that's what we like. We haven't gotten to a break where we're like, okay, we're sick of it. We need to play something else. So I think I could get my group to play Star Trek, but I wanted to learn the rules. And I have so many Star Trek source books because of various humble bundles and what have you. And so I'm like, I have all this stuff. I love Star Trek. I should just play it. I will say the challenge I've had with this book is that it is simplified 2D20, and we've been playing Fallout. We played a lot of Fallout at this point. And it broke my brain a little bit because it's very simplified. So you don't have this pool. I'm like, where is the pool of action points that I can use? There is no pool. There's just like one momentum, and you can choose to spend it on rolls and what have you. And it's very different. I found I was fighting against the rules. We'll get into that, into challenges later. But I do think it's a cool book. And I think if you like Star Trek and you're if you're looking for a solo game and you're looking for something that has like a deep, history to it, and you kind of like want that lever of universe to be able to say, I don't want to have to do all of the creative thinking. I just want to like tell a story in the Star Trek universe. This could be a good launching off point. So speaking of launching off points, traditional games with solo modes, Ironsworn falls into this category. It's funny, we were talking about it just before the show, and my default mode for this is to think of it as a solo game. But as you were saying, it's actually all of them.
Yeah. So Ironsworn is the medieval Conan feeling one. Starforged is the sci-fi version, and then the Sundered Isles is the steampunk pirate seafaring, airship faring, we've got robots feeling version that they just came. It's the most recent one, which is actually an offshoot of Starforged, not Ironsworn. So it's kind of an offshoot of an offshoot. And it's because Starforged is just more developed. It's got a little more meat to it. Which is not to say that there isn't plenty of stuff for Ironsworn. The delve expansion for Ironsworn is really great, where you have dungeon delves and all of that. So, my point is that these are all based, they're highly customized, powered by the Apocalypse systems, but you can play solo co-op. I'm in a co-op game with our friend Thomas, and then you could play it. They call it guided. So it's with a game master, but it's a little bit more like it's guided in that really the game master helps you with the oracles and things. So it's almost like you sit down with a party of people and the guide just knows the system better and can help the party invent their own, as opposed to a game master that is supposed to know everything. It's imagine having a guide for your solo game. I mean, that's exactly what it is. And it is by far the most complex of the solo RPGs that I've played, but it's also been one of the most rewarding. It blew me away with the level. When I first sat down to play it, I kind of had a similar experience to what you had with Captain's Log. It was kind of like, wait, what am I doing? I don't understand. The mechanics are weird. I don't get it. But as I began to play it, I began to understand what was happening and how it was happening. And my imagination would just latch onto things and go crazy. And it was so neat because it's the first time at that time in years, like you, I discovered it during the pandemic, but in years where my inner let's pretend just really went into overdrive. And
yes.
And especially if you augment it. All of these solo games are great if you augment them with not only writing, but go make a map, go find artwork, put together a vision board, or whatever you want to call it. But we had a wiki going at one point, and we had the idea of chronicling this emergent world as we create it was really powerful.
Yeah, so I agree. That's been a very appealing part to all of it. And I think the cool thing is that it has caught on, that there are so many different adaptations out there now. So you can find the game, I think, that's going to fit the mindset that you're currently in, and perhaps the rules that best work with how your brain is set up. The Forbidden Lands is funny. It was on sale a number of years ago. And so this is very much a Nordic inspired hex crawl type game. I'm like, oh, this would be totally cool, right? Like, you have your solo character, he just goes from hex to hex, you just roll on tables to find out what you discover in Lost Ruins. That whole exploration thing was very appealing. And at the time I was thinking this might be a good game for my lunchtime crew, because it felt like it was going to be a rules light game. And it is in some ways, but mechanically it's actually somewhat complex. It has some funky dice, like you can use regular dice, but how hits work and how things are resolved is a little bit more complex. And like combat has a back and forth to it. So if you're hit, you're not automatically hitting. Like you hit your target, but then your target has an opportunity to parry. And so there's this whole combat subsystem. And as I was playing through it and created my first character and had a lot of fun doing like the whole building part, the doing part, I got to, oh, well, geez, this isn't going to work for my lunchtime crew. And so then I put it away. To your point, like I think part of the mindset, and we'll talk about this later, is getting out of I have to be doing this for a reason. And so since my reason was to play this to learn the rules for my group, once I realized I wasn't going to use it for my lunchtime game, like my enthusiasm for it just kind of dropped off. But, I might go back to it at some point. So for Forbidden Lands, their expansion, like I mentioned at the top of the show, was released as part of Book of Beasts. It's a streamlined version of the solo rules. And then there's an expansion that's available on Drive-Thru-RPG by the author of the solo game rules for Forbidden Lands, where he expands on it. It's basically the stuff that didn't make the cut for the print book. And so it adds a whole bunch of additional sort of nuances to playing the solo version. And then what I've got in the queue, I will note there are solo rules for Shadowdark. It's out there. If you're interested in Shadowdark, it's worth checking out, especially, again, if you're trying to learn the system. I think I've got so much Shadowdark going on in my life, I don't actually need a solo version. But what I do like, and you and I geeked about this at some point, I think it would be fun to return to it after we both had a chance to use it, but the single player mode for Cyberpunk Red looks really cool. you're using the base rules. They don't streamline it at all, but they give you advice on how to resolve conflicts and what have you within the game. They give you some ideas about how to do the story beats, but in solo mode. And to your earlier point, how I'm hoping to use this is, it's been a bit since we did our Cyberpunk Red campaign, but in my head, I've been thinking about, well, what has the Maker Enclave been doing? Which is this group of people who void warranties. You guys ran into them in like the first season. And I'm like, I'd like to see what those guys are doing. So having a solo mode where, I just run that out and see what they've been up to, like what the side story is. And with the intention of it will kind of, maybe it connects back to the main story. I don't know. It might. It might not. I don't know that I really care, but I like the idea of telling a sub story within the campaign, maybe just for me. So that's an attractive side quest.
No, I think that's great. I was really enthusiastic when this came out, and I don't know how much I will use it to run my own solo RPG game, but the oracle tables, the random tables in this book are worth the price of admission. One of the challenges that I have with Cyberpunk is I'm running it at a game shop, which means that people drop in and out.
Right.
So creating a campaign with a through line and a plot is very difficult. But creating a series of gigs and then having the players, upgrade their headquarters and all of that, that's more possible. So this will help get me out of a rut,
right,
or something like that. But what I really like about your Maker Enclave thing is, that authors will sometimes say they create this story Bible for the world, but only tell this narrow story in it.
Yes.
But they know about all the other things, and because they know the other things, it shapes the story, even though you may never encounter it. I think that's worthwhile for a GM to have, to know that the Maker Enclave is doing this thing over here. You may never touch on it, but if your party's a bunch of chaotic, that are going to go off your plot line, then you may very well need to know that. So not only have you entertained yourself and expanded your world, expanded the depth of the thing that you're running, you have something in your back pocket now that you don't just have written down, that you've experienced. And because of that, it sits in your head differently.
Yeah, and I was just thinking as you were talking about that, I think the other thing is, it could be sort of the counterpoint to railroading, right? So as a GM, I think people can get frustrated when they have a story that they'd really like to tell, they're hoping their players will follow, and then they don't. And sometimes people will brute force it to get people back on the path, right? But with solo RPG, you could create your own fork of the campaign, or you just tell those stories that you'd wish the players had done. And you get to do what you wanted to do, and your players get to do what they wanted to do, and everybody's maybe happier.
Yep. No, agree. A lot of these games allow that. We've talked about sandbox gaming and the Synomine systems and all of that, which is still worth talking more about at some point. But, the idea that you have the world in your head, you don't just have this narrow line. This could definitely help with filling out what that world is.
So moving on to variants. It's kind of akin, because I think you're just still telling the story in your head to a somewhat, is the solo mode board games. So Dark Tower you referenced, is that like the Dark Tower with the big black tower?
This is the new version that they came together and put together. Yeah, I mean it is the same game, but you play it by yourself and you lay out all the pieces and you do your thing. Just like Arkham Horror has a solo mode, and I don't know about you, but I've always found that playing Arkham Horror as an RPG rather than as a board game is more fun for me. Just because it can get really long. And as a board game goes, like, if I think of it as a board game, 90 minutes and out, but that's not Arkham Horror if you play it right. And so playing it more in the mindset of an RPG kind of helps. But I mean, again, with Dark Tower, they give you the story beats, they give you what happens, they help you decide consequences and things. But you can, if you are interested in that, you can create the story in your head of what's actually happening. But this is another one where maybe you can't get people to sit down and play these games with you. Having a solo mode allows you to play with the system. I've got a couple others like this. Of course, I can't remember their names right now, but like big, beefy, involved games with lots of pieces and things, but that have a solo mode, allow you to get in and play and not have to strong arm your people into sitting down with you. And I think that's worthwhile because you bought the thing. You should play the thing.
Yeah, definitely. And so for Arkham, I think I will say Arkham's a great example of just kind of emergent play that happens even when you're not purposely trying to tell a story, because people just roll poorly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you got the person who's just continually getting ambushed by monsters in the street. And so it becomes sort of like the running joke during that particular uh, adventure that, well, don't go into the streets. You're going to, oh, sorry. Yes, you just got kicked out of the Silver Twilight Lodge for the third time because those guys just hate you. And oh, wait, look, there's a zombie. But the Arkham I was thinking of was the card game. So it actually the
Right.
non-collectible card game, and so it's designed to be played with 1 to 2 players. I think there's an expansion that will take it to 3 to 4. But I have the Edge of the Earth, which has been sitting on my shelf for entirely too long. It's sort of inspired by the At the Mountains of Madness, and I'm looking forward to just kind of taking this and just playing it up in my in-laws' cabin in the winter, right? Just set it up on the table. No one's around to disturb it, and just kind of play through that game. And it's, it's easier to play because it's giving you you're rolling your dice and you're making your decisions, and there's some resource management, but it's helping drive the story. So it's a little easier on you from a storytelling mode. I think you can't help but then fall into sort of that narrative that you're playing out in your head. So that kind of segues into successes and challenges. So I have too many bullet points here. So why don't you start? Because I think mindset is actually where you should start, because it is a different mindset. And I think if you come into it, I won't say wrong. I don't know that there's anything right or wrong, but you should know that how you think about how you approach the game is.
Okay. I'm going to start from a weird place, but forgive me, this is just how my brain works. Timothy Leary, when he talked about dropping acid in the 60s, go ahead, spew your coffee, talked about set and setting. And whether you were on a good trip or a bad trip really depended on who you were with and what the setting was when you created these, when you took the drug. I'm not encouraging you to take acid when you play your your role-playing games, entertaining though that might be. But what I am saying is I have found, at least for myself, that there's a little preparation, a little ritual, that I need to do mentally to sit down and allow myself space to play this thing that I may never tell anyone else about and that no one may experience with me. It's almost a permission giving that
Right.
I need to give myself to go have fun without a purpose. And I know how that sounds, but I have a feeling a lot of very busy adults out there that are listening understand exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, trying to make space for a solo hobby in this world, something that you don't turn into content, that you don't blog about, that you don't, is challenging, because we're told we need to have a purpose and we need to have a side hustle. And this has been a thing for 20 some years now, but you don't. You can just go play like a child plays. And so I think giving us that permission to feel whatever we're going to feel when we play this game, to take it to light or dark places, to experience these things. I think set and setting play into this a lot. It's funny. I have a hard time playing solo RPGs at my computer.
Yeah.
Because it's a different thing. I'm a coder. I think a certain way when I sit down at the computer. It's very purpose driven, or I'm going to get lost in the internet for several hours. But to sit down and just even computer games that I play, I tend to be very goal driven. But to sit down and just discover, I really like to do it on paper. I really like to have an all analog experience. And it takes a while to let go of the idea, I need to organize this so that I can put it in a blog post.
Right.
It takes a little bit to have that go. The idea that you don't need to play this and then turn it into a novel to sell. You are not producing a thing, I think is, or at least for me and maybe some others out there, a key point that's going to allow for greater creativity as you get into this. So I think that's the biggest challenge that I have, is permission to sit down and do a thing with no purpose.
Yeah. No, I think that's very true and very apt. I think I've had similar challenges, because I do think the first and foremost, and it's not like I've written a ton of books and short stories, but I think there is this sort of destination driven sort of approach to it, that you just sit down and go, well, I'm writing a story. And it's like, but you're not. Yeah. I mean, you are, but,
Yeah.
and you can just see where it goes. And so I've had some tension as I've been working with these things. Particularly, I came up with this with Captain's Log, where it's like I'm almost writing out this Star Trek episode in my brain, and when the the die rolls don't go as I anticipated. It's like, but that's not the story I was telling. But wait, it's okay. I can let it go.
It is so. I'm sorry. It has so
no, go
much.
ahead.
It has so much more in common with one of the things that I like to do is just get in my car and follow a road I haven't followed and see where it goes. In the age of GPS, that's easier to do than it used to be. Because getting home isn't as big a deal. But the idea of giving yourself over to the road and discovering what's along the way, I find to be a better metaphor for this sort of gaming than, creating or drafting a story or that kind of thing. Because it leaves you open to that discovery. And, I like you, I have things in mind for this character, but when a thing comes out of left field from an oracle, number one, you can decide whether you want to do that or not. But for me, I feel better about this horrible thing has happened. This is interesting. Let's run with that and see where it goes. I find that to be really refreshing, and I like not having as much control over that. Otherwise, I'm just kind of mirror soup.
Yes. So some challenges I've had and where I've gotten stuck in different places is, for example, with Starforged.
Mm-hmm.
I found creating my character in the universe was more fun than actually playing the game. So, and you and I and David have been trying to do a Starforged thing. So I think part of it, I was doing this at the same time to try and learn the rules and just kind of how it worked while we were also trying a version of Starforged. And I think I may have just crossed my way. I didn't really enjoy following all the rules and getting everything set up and setting up the background. And then I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm kind of done.
I think we should do a guided version of this, because I'm finding when I play with Tom, it's semi-guided because he's new and I know the system better, but we discover things along the way. And yeah. I think you would enjoy that.
So I will say, and I was going to have a list of resources at the bottom, and I think we're just kind of talking about them as we go along. The Solo Game Master's Guide. I don't remember if you picked this one up. Did you pick this one up, right?
Yeah, I did. Good one. Very good.
Geek Gamers. It's published by Modiphius. It's a thin little book, but it's really cool. And it offers a lot of advice about, especially with things regarding how not to get stuck on the narrative, how not to start your character with actual character creation in the rules, but maybe start the character with a particular idea or hook or relic or item from that world and tell the history of the item and how it interacts with your character. But one of the things that they have here, and I'm trying to find the picture, or they're kind of 10 rules or whatever, but they talk about, number one is everything is playing. And I think this is actually a great rule, and it kind of goes to, I don't want to say forgiving yourself, but maybe it is. It's I say, I kind of failed with my Starforged game because I never actually ran the game. But I didn't, because I built the whole thing out. That's enough. I read the rules, that's playing. Building out the world, that was playing. And I got to a point where, okay, well, maybe that was far enough. But it was all playing. It wasn't a failed campaign because I just didn't actually play it through in some epic arc. I got to a decent point and I stopped. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Some things are haikus, some things are novels. It's just, but I loved that book. I wish I could find it in print. You're very lucky. I can't find a print copy to save my life. But no, it's a great resource. And it's just about shaking all of that stuff loose. I'm sure there's something very Jungian in all of this, and the psychotherapist would have a field day with it. But the idea that everything is play fits right into those of us that are game masters. We think that creating the world is just work for the game to play in, but it in and of itself is a game. And so well worth it. Right.
I have hundreds of books on the shelf behind me. I have played a fraction of those. Actually sat down and played, but I like this idea of even just reading I've read most of them, or read at least portions of most of them, and that all counts as playing, right? And so it's not a waste of time and money to have bought the books if I got some enjoyment out of the book. So being kind to yourself in that regard, I think, is helpful. Another struggle I've had is the rules or the game just turned out to be more complex than you anticipated. So Forbidden Lands is this for me. I'll come back to it at some point, but I realized mechanically kind of crunchy. Yeah. Maybe for various reasons, like I explained before, it wasn't going to work for my lunchtime game. So then I decided, okay, well, I just need to put this off to the side. But also, it was just more mechanically complex than I was anticipating. And it's it wasn't going to be relaxing for me to play this solo. So I think for a variety of reasons, just put it down, put it on the shelf. But again, not really a failed game because I had fun making my character. I learned the system. I started a hex crawl. I went a couple of hexes. It was fun and it's good. And now I'm done. But you can run into problems with it being complex. And it's okay, it's You had fun, you learned it, now you move on to the next game. And then getting stuck in the narrative, which is where I'm currently at with Captain's Log, is it's not, I don't know if it's even necessarily stuck in the narrative. I kind of started down this path where the story is that I have an away team. The main character is basically a scout who grew up on the fringes of Federation culture because was kind of out on the outs, but then like discovered the value of Starfleet, came back, became kind of like a lieutenant and like leads these away missions. And so they crashed on this planet in this weird star system with 3 different stars and there's challenges, and it's a metal-based world. So all of the plant life is enriched with various strains of metal toxic to humans, and their shuttle crashed and was destroyed by one of these like dragon-like giant bugs. And so I started down this path of like, okay, so what are they going to have to do? Well, actually, they have to get off this planet. The starship isn't due back for several weeks because they were meant to be here kind of roughing it until the ship came back because it's off exploring other parts. And so they're going to have to build a communicator. And how are they going to do that? Well, they're going to extract the metals they need from all of this plant life and animal life or whatever. And so I started going down this path of like, okay, so there's going to be 3 things they need. And then I got to this point where I'm like, this isn't actually, you know what? This is just Starfleet. Maybe they just did it, right? Like, well, yeah. I made the rules. I don't need to do the rules for all 3 components. They're just going to do it. Because it's more interesting is why they actually crashed. And I have the idea that there's this group of like people who are on the planet to extract the natural resources. And that's the reason why the bug dragons freaked out and attacked. And so getting to that conflict is more interesting than whether or not I was able to like strip silicon from this particular resource.
This is not a computer role-playing game where you need to go and craft all the things. I think giving yourself permission to steal from another system in that time, like if I were doing that and I got caught up in that, my mind goes to the thing that we did in Scum and Villainy, which is, okay, well, now we can just explain how we thought about this before, and we have this kit that will do the thing for us. You know, You want to do the fun stuff. The point isn't to be realistic.
Right.
You know, I mean, unless you're really into that. There are some people, like, there's a great solo game that I got from Modifius called 5 Parsecs from Home.
Oh, yeah, I've heard a lot about that one.
Which is, kind of military-based, but it's got a lot more crunch to it. It's got, you move pieces, you do things. Great if you have a board for it. And that fits a certain type of war game that might not be into the Starforged or the Captain's Log and that kind of thing. But, if you are into that, then, hey, you can sit and formulate this stuff all you want and play it out, and it's great. But if it becomes a chore, then maybe hand wave a little bit. It's only for you. No one's going to judge you on this, and realizing that even not judging yourself on it is really hard.
Yeah. The other problem I ran into was I couldn't stop hacking the rules as I was playing, as I was going. Like, I'm learning the rules, but I'm feeling like I need to hack them as I go. And with Captain's Log, baseline, the idea is that you're a single character. You're the command person, right? Like, so it can be either the captain, you could be an admiral, but you could also just be like, in my case, the leader of the away team. But what I found was, because the Star Trek ethos for me is very much about teamwork, I wanted my away team to be more than just like cardboard cutouts of characters that don't actually do anything, that only show up narratively. Like, I wanted them to have skills that could contribute to the thing that was happening. But that's not really how Captain's Log is set up. It's like your skills as your character are the ones who basically are the thing that's driving the game and determine your successes and failures. And if you need to represent the crew, then you use your starship stats to reflect the crew's capabilities, which add to the roles. But what I really wanted was like just thumbnail versions of these characters where maybe they only have one skill and they add to your particular role. Right. The challenge I was running into was I didn't understand at the time the mechanic and how it was different from the normal 2D20 games that we were playing, and how it's actually skewed towards success. So any additional bonuses you add is just actually making it even easier for your character. So I got a little bit up into my own head over it not working the way I wanted it to work. But I think I just want to kind of push through that because I'm enjoying the story, and just like, it's just going to be what it is. And it gets to the end, and maybe I'll go back and do a write-up on, and here's how you can use NPCs with signature stats.
Right. No, I think you wind up customizing it, but I also think it's worth going out and finding, someone has put together a video of how they play, right? And it may not be how you play, but you may be able to steal this, that, or the other thing. Or like I said, if Captain's Log doesn't have a good way of kind of flushing out those NPCs, go steal the NPC system from Starforge, because they have a great way of thumbnailing NPCs, But yeah, I mean, each of these systems is designed to do a thing. And it may not do it well initially, or it may not do it well until you understand the whole system. Like, playing through a whole game, you will learn things about the system that in the middle of it you're not going to get. And it's hard because you have to be patient and give yourself the space to do it, as opposed to just sitting down and it springing forth fully formed from your brow.
Yes. I think, and this will segue into like this, I think where I've been most successful with this by some definition of success is I think I like the idea of faster advancement. That may also be tripping me up. So both Starforged and Captain's Log kind of have an extended sort of experience chart, basically, as to how you're earning experience and resolving vows or getting through the 3 acts in Star Trek. And it's like, actually, I think I only wanted it to be 1 act. And honestly, I think I'd like to advance faster. I'd like to have like measurable mechanical advancement in this one session, because I don't have that much free time. Like, I don't have a year to play Starforged to get my character to resolve my ultimate vow, right? Which you don't have to, but still, it just I feel like I wasn't making progress, which again goes, it doesn't matter if you're making progress or not. But I think being able to hack out those pieces to move it at the pace you want to, which I think is why I liked the standalone ones and why I think I've been most successful in terms of completing them, right? Everything is play, but in terms of completing them, because they are self-contained, they are meant to be kind of played in a sitting, and then you could go back and do it again if you wanted to, but you can get through it in one go.
Yeah. And I think there's definitely a place for that, because you feel some accomplishment after doing that. And I get it. There are things in Starforged like the progress tracks. Number one, I was using progress tracks completely wrong from the beginning. And progress was very, very slow. But then I got into it and I started playing with another person and we read the rules together, and Tom sees things that I don't. And so we kind of, and so, I began to learn, you use project tracks, progress tracks for everything, and everything counts, and and it just takes a little bit to get used to that. But yeah, it's the, I don't know what I'm doing, and it feels like I'm fumbling, it feels like I'm not doing this right, but it's going to take 1 or 2 plays to get there. And that's okay too. That's okay too.
Yeah. So I think that kind of sums it up on me. I think taking some lessons learned from these smaller self-contained games and applying them to the larger scale games might be a good approach for me.
Yeah. I think
so you have in your note in terms of successes, real immersion. So what do you mean by real immersion?
Yeah, real immersion. This might just be a me thing. I find being connected to things to be unpleasantly like having telepathy you can't shut off. I have notifications coming to my phone all the time. It's constantly drawing me out of the moment. You know that feeling when you're reading a book and you're immersed and you lose track of time? I've had some people tell me this is an ADHD trait. Maybe it is, but I tend to think of it as just focus. And I like being focused. I enjoy that. Or sometimes it's called being in the zone where time goes away. This is what I think of when I think of real immersion, is that I have let go of the world and I am in the moment and just playing the game, just experiencing the story. The visuals are strong in my head. And I do know there are folks that don't get visuals, things. I get a lot of visualization and things like that. But this is one of the reasons I like playing offline completely. I am entirely too likely, if I'm playing online, to go and have an LLM generate a picture of what I'm trying to see and get wrapped in that, or trying to map it out and turn it into some sort of productivity exercise. But by getting offline and playing just with the physical stuff, I'm able to immerse myself for a while in something that is not connected to the outside world. I find a lot of solace and comfort in that. That's cozy to me, which is why a zombie game on paper could be a cozy game for me, because it ignores the outside world. Sanctuary, I guess, is another way of thinking.
Yeah, I think most of the stuff that I've done, and that's another sort of like getting to completion, I think most of the ones I've actually completed, one, they were zines and self-contained, but also I have a solo journaling book. Like I have a bullet journal type thing for it. And I think writing it is helpful. It also helps you not over plan. or over like get too far into the weeds in particular areas because you have to physically write it. I type very, very fast because I used to be a reporter. So it's very easy for me to keep up with my thoughts when I'm typing. It is harder when I'm hand writing things out. And I think that forces focus and forces being in the real world. I think this is actually this is probably its own entire topic, but I'll touch on it quickly because I've seen it come up in a couple of different forums. There are people who like to use AI, like LLMs, to serve this role as the game master. Like you could load the solo rules into it and then have it be the oracle and have it be basically the thing that you're interacting with rather than it entirely coming from your own brain. And if that works for you, I think that's great, fine. But for me, I think it's been trained on all of this sort of the tropes of human history, right? And so I think it can lead you down paths that are more predictable, right? Because it's so it wants to please you. Basically, that's how these things have been set up. They're the infinite yes men, right? And so I think I like being offline and not getting drawn into the AI and going down all of these sort of like, for me, unhelpful paths, because that's not why I'm doing this. I want to do it in the physical world. I don't want to leverage AI to use it. Now, I have used AI to like in reserved instances that are not populating content out to the larger world as like rules lookups, those kinds of things. But I think I'd rather physically roll the dice. I'd like to physically open up to the table and be present in that way.
Yeah. I think your point about the aesthetics of the experience itself is really important. I've putzed around with AI as a game master or as a summation tool of what's come before, or had it like one of the things I did was I created the world in Starforged and then had it write a narrative. And, I mostly come out with it's fine. I mean, I wouldn't have sat down and written that narrative, throwing it at something and having it do that. That's fine. But I don't get the same rush out of it. AI is so fraught as a topic.
Yes.
That it breaks a little bit of that immersion for me. Like, I will go and use an LLM for some of my D&D stuff and such. Again, rules lookups, generating stats, that kind of thing. Because it's an aid, but it's not doing it all for me. But for this, I want to do as much of it as I can. And I think your point about why am I doing this? The tech is mostly irrelevant. It just doesn't give me what I would love to have the Star Trek AI that's or a full personality that's like a person that you're playing with, but then it's not solo anymore. And it's not true to who you are in that moment. What it does is what I found that AI does is that it speeds up things that maybe should be slow.
This is very true. This is very, very true. But perhaps a topic for another episode.
Yeah, well, I think about, and again, this is a topic for another time, but there are people who have said that AI has been created by technologists who don't understand the value of the journey. Composing the music is as important as having the finished song. Writing the novel is as important as having the finished book. And that's what AI gets you. You can get through the journey real fast, but you're not going to have the quality. You're not going to have the experience. You're not going to have the experience of the journey. And I think that has held true. I think it's an interesting technology and it can be a lot of fun to play with, but at the end of the day, it's trivia.
Right. I think the journey is important. I think one of, in Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, one of the big quotes or principles for one of the main characters is journey before destination, right? It's a key principle or insight these characters learn along the way. And I really like that approach where there's many ways to get to the end, but the journey helps define who you are and the story you told along the way. And if you just skip to the end, it's, sometimes the destination is more important. You need to get there as quickly as possible. But I think for this, journey before destination definitely resonates for me.
I totally agree. It stands in stark contrast to most of our jobs where we set yearly or quarterly goals and march as fast as we can for as little money toward those goals. And really, it can be a very soul-sucking exercise because you become part of a machine as opposed to a living creature having an experience in this world with other people. And I like this for the same reason I like role-playing games with people. You're having a human storytelling experience with people that you can carry with you. It happened, It happened.
That's an excellent place to pause. And some of these things, I think maybe we'll stay tuned, maybe come back to in the future. But we'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Find our show notes on lairofsecrets.com. And, leave your comments on your own experiences with solo RPGs, games that you like, what have you. And maybe we'll talk about them in a future episode.